is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news and intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversations. 96.9 FM. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the management and staff of Guardian Radio.
You're listening to Talking Heads with Naughty, hosted by Earl the Pearl. On Guardian Radio, 96.9 FM.
Talking Heads with Naughty is brought to you by the Bahamas Football Association, Burger King, the Cat Island Rake and Scrape Festival, City of Hope, Fine Threads, John's Department Store, Joker's Wild, KFC, Monty Johnny's, Percy's Island Games, Pindertal, Print Masters, Sandcastle Bahamas, Tropical Gyros, and the Water and Sewage Corporation.
I'm falling, so I'm taking my time on my ride.
And good afternoon, good day, happy Thursday in Guardian Radio 96.9 is a Talking Heads Thursday. Yes, this is Pearly in the house. It is so good to be here with you. And I'm so excited about this show. I have a very special guest. We're going to introduce her in a minute, but just before that, you know what you got to do, right, to be a talking head? If you don't know, I'll tell you.
Here's how you can become a talking head, brought to you by BTC.
And it's so simple. 323-6232. 325-4316, 325-4259, or those of you in the Family Islands who want to hear my voice through the phone, 242-300-5720. And if you're shy, you don't want to talk, you can always text me. And it's powered by BTC, 422-GR96, 422-4796. Let me hear from you. So, what's going on in the headlines?
It's time for Headliners. Everything that's making headlines in the 242. Brought to you by the Fine Threads.
And this morning in the Nassau Guardian, government targets budget surplus, 75 million surplus projected. Government slashes VAT on diapers, medicine, and more. You put it up, you slash it down. Budget does not reflect any proceeds of Grand Lucayan sale. And the F&M says the budget surplus projection is a sad farce. And in the business section, PM says private cruise destinations will drive GDP growth. I remember some comments were made when they're in opposition, but we can get to that another time. Improvements in tourism arrival numbers driven by increase in cruise passengers. Therefore, government plans to ensure cruise lines with private islands are compliant in paying their relevant tax contributions. You know, if you don't have a bunch of people overnight and this ain't no money. The government funding for farmers should force on government guaranteed loan grants. Davis investing in infrastructure will encourage economic growth. Easy Car Sales opening BYD showroom at Mall at Marathon tomorrow. How's everybody doing? Summer is here. Whether you like it or not, it's hot. It is hot. All right, but just for that, we have something good to tell you, something really good. Guardian Media Group and Going Places Travel wants to take you on a 7-day cruise for 4 to Panama, Colombia, Curacao, and Aruba on Royal Caribbean's Serenade of the Seas. And here's the best part. No visa required. That's right, no visa required. You have 4 ways to enter, 4 ways to win. 1, fill out the form in the Nassau Guardian. 2, listen to Star FM and Pearly on Guardian Radio. Well, everybody else on Guardian Radio 96.9. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, or make a purchase at Going Places Travel. The entry deadline is June 27, 2025, and the drawing is on July 4th, 2025. So pack your bags, get ready to soak up the sun and feel that ocean breeze. You and 3 loved ones, you and 2 plus Pearly, loved ones, sailing the high seas on a vacation cruise of a lifetime. Brought to you by the Guardian Media Group and Going Places Travel. Certain conditions apply. Airfare, taxes, and gratuities are not included. And I can tell you the best vacation in the world is a cruise. So I have a special guest here today. I've been listening to you. You're telling me too many politicians coming on. You need to hear some people who can bring up unbiased approach, a down the middle of the road approach. And so I have gotten the best guest, I think. One of the foremost economists in the world, in the region, in the Bahamas, our guest, Therese Turner Jones. Welcome to Talking Heads with Pearly.
Thank you, Earl.
And just to give you a little background, see, I don't want you to think I bring no fluff people here. And I bring in people who have experience in this world. I ain't talking about this right here. Teresa served for many decades in a professional capacity with the International Monetary Fund, Inter-American Development Bank, and the Caribbean Development Bank. She has lived and worked in Washington, D.C., Guinea, Conakry, that's right. Conakry, Jamaica, Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean, and of course here in the Bahamas. She's a trained economist with over 30 years of experience in macroeconomics and economic development with special expertise in the Caribbean and Latin America. If anyone knows about this, I think Therese knows about this. Welcome to Talking Heads. It's so good to have you here with us.
Thank you very much. Really, really a pleasure, Earl.
It's so good to have you here. And before we get into it, what have you been doing recently? I know you recently retired, or we call it, but I'm telling people I'm semi-retired.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. So I have a consultancy. I have a consultancy called Maxwen Limited, and I'm working with some private sector entities across the region, as well as some governments, giving advice on what to do when they get into a pickle, like whether it's fiscal or whether it's they're launching a new project. I'm very much concerned about sustainability, renewable energy, diversification of our energy mix across this region, not just because of it's the right thing to do now, given climate change and what's happening with our planet, but because countries have basically made commitments to doing it, and so we need to get on with it and do it. Also because I'm concerned about what we're going to leave behind for our children and grandchildren if the trajectory of the consumption continues globally. We will need many more planets to be able to sustain our lifestyle. So this is where my head is at. This is where my heart is at. And I'm really happy to be back in the Bahamas. I've been back since early March, trying to get settled. My shipment is promised to me by Monday.
So
it's taken about 8 weeks to arrive from Barbados.
Okay.
So I'm really excited about that. But yes, it's good to be home.
So
Thank
good
you.
to have you here. And all right, full disclosure, I've known this lady all my life. And when I say all my life, she born a couple of years before me. So we're two sisters' children, and so we're very dear. But she's one of my favorites, and don't let Bernard hear that. But and it's so good to talk to you. I
did up to the point where ZNS started to have some communication glitches, and then I had to switch off. But I downloaded the document, and of course I read it. So I'm familiar with the communication. Yes, so I did listen, and I have read it.
In a nutshell, what do you think?
So in a nutshell, and this is with a lot of different hats on. My first hat that I'm going to respond to is as an economist.
Okay.
And for those of you who know my work, I've written co-authored a book on fiscal challenges in the Caribbean. So fiscal issues are really sort of, I sleep and eat and drink them every day. So it's important. So let me first respond as an economist to the budget. It would appear that the budget is appealing to a population that's about to go into an election. And I'm not saying this from any political bias. I'm just saying there are it's a very feel-good budget. It's a budget that is geared towards a lot of Bahamians across the spectrum. It's not just targeted at the investor class. A lot of it is targeted at vulnerable groups. I think he touched on a lot of very important subjects, including climate change, renewable energy, sustainable development. There's a whole lot around guarding the impact of inflation, especially given what's happening geopolitically. So there are some, what I call, very important statements in the budget that suggest to me that the mindset of the administration is caring about what Bahamians are hurting about. Now, there are ways that can be read. And because I'm not here to give one particular view or the other, I would say that there's a lot in the budget that people will say are good things. So, and I cast those in the bucket of the giveaways.
Okay.
What I think, if I'm to put on a little bit more critical hat from a fiscal perspective, and by the way, let me also say, I think it's really important that the Bahamas is at a stage where we can offer a balanced budget. And I say that again with my fiscal hat on because I will bring Bahamians back and remind them that we have a fiscal responsibility law. We have established a fiscal council. So there's a lot of inherent checks and balances that every administration is supposed to be adhering to in the presentation of the budget.
Keyword suppose.
Suppose. Okay, so bear that in mind as you are reading some of the narrative. There are a couple of things that are a little bit concerning. We're going to get into that.
Okay.
But I think overall, the Bahamian people should be pleased with this one aspect, and I think it's really important. And listening to Minister Sears just before this segment, he referred to it as fiscal discipline. It's important that our stewards, when I say stewards, the people who are responsible for the managing of the Bahamian government's resources, and by the way, to call it the Bahamian government's resources is a bit of a misnomer because actually it's taxpayers' resources that we have entrusted in a certain administration to benefit the Bahamian public. Not just the Bahamian public, but also they are to safeguard the image of the country, the reputation, and the references to the credit ratings and the new upgrades and so on. Very important. Minister Sears also mentioned in his remarks that, remember, this budget is also being read by our multilateral partners, IMF in particular, but investors outside and inside are looking for some signals. And if I were an investor, domestic or external, what am I looking for? I'm looking for what's happening with the debt trajectory of the Bahamian government. So what we're seeing in this budget for the first time, and I'm trying to go all the way back, but I haven't done enough research up to now, whether this is actually the first time there's a primary surplus. I'm not sure that is the case, but let's say in modern history.
It was projected in 2001 by then Minister of Finance Bill Allen.
Okay.
I don't know if it came to fruition.
We ever made it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's an accomplishment. Now, it's small, it's 0.5% of GDP, as I've gotten the draft estimate, so I just looked that number up earlier. But it is something, because without a primary surplus, we cannot be on a downward debt trajectory. Now, why is this important? Back to the references to the credit rating agencies. If you look at some of the statements that were made by Fitch, by Moody's, by S&P around the Bahamian prospects over the last 5 years, but the most recent ones, there are some concerns. The debt has always been one. The
Yes.
fact that we are heavily exposed to climate change is another. And so they're looking at ways in which the government or the administration is mitigating those risks. So the credit rating agencies are all about mitigating risk and looking towards the future. So it's a snapshot in time. It's saying, oh, wow, things are looking better, revenues are higher, GDP is growing, tourism, which is our main economy, is showing a lot of strength. Those are definite positives. But when you dig down deep into the budget, there are things you want to also pay attention to, right? So things like what's happening with what economists call the rigid part of the expenditures. So wages and salaries, because you can't exactly fire people overnight. It takes a while to get rid of people on the public purse. So if that number starts to balloon, then you say, okay, hold on, what's happening there? The other thing is to look at interest expenditures. So what are we paying to our creditors for monies we've borrowed? If that number is coming down, that's a really good thing. If the average interest rate on our debt is declining, that's a good thing. That will only decline to the extent that we can improve our credit rating. Because it's like you and me, when we go into a commercial bank and we want to borrow money, they're going to look at our credit worthiness. If we have too much debt, well, you're going to pay higher, right? They still want to lend you the money, but you just have to pay higher.
Okay.
The same thing applies to government. When things are going really, really well, we get the best interest rates out there, which means they're low, which means they're affordable. It allows us to sustain our debt better over time. Another plug for this particular aspect in the budget is the recent debt exchange around nature. So the one that we got an award for, I keep forgetting what it's actually called.
Carbon credits?
Not the carbon credits, but the the debt exchange facilitated by the IDB
Oh, yeah.
with Nature Conservancy to use proceeds towards protecting our marine resources. Excellent initiative. We got an award for it. But for the Bahamian public, what we need to be monitoring over the coming months and years is, are those areas that were targeted to benefit from the savings, are we seeing that? So it's one thing to have done the operation, it's another thing to get the benefit of the operation because the monies are actually accruing to mangrove restoration,
Right.
Maritime resources, and so on. So I think I credit that initiative. I think it's really good. It's not a magic bullet, but it is something that I think is going to help. And the headline, the message it sends to the rest of the world is the Bahamas is concerned about biodiversity loss, its ability to maintain its sea defenses. That's what mangroves do for us.
Right.
So when there's a hurricane, it protects seawater coming in inland. So there's a whole lot of good things that can happen if we do that thing properly.
Okay.
So I think those, to me, those are some of the highlights. Obviously, there's a lot more that I would like to see in the narrative. I want to know what is the story that's being told. And I think the Prime Minister tried very hard to paint a picture of this is a budget because this administration recognizes that Bahamians are hurting, and that came up a lot in the previous conversation.
64%.
Lots of people are
Yeah.
hurting in various ways. We know that this is an economy, even though we have a high GDP per capita, close to $40,000 US or more, that number does not really represent the average, right? So we
Right.
know that we have a skewed, what's called a Gini coefficient in economic terms. We have unequal income distribution in this country, right? So we always have to be mindful of a tax falling on which part of the population.
Right.
And VAT, as the minister reminded us on the other segment, falls equally on everybody. So when you remove VAT on some items, whether it's bread basket items or whether it's hygiene products for women, everybody gets the benefit from that. Whether I can afford it or not, I get the benefit. Typically, what economists advise governments to do when they want to give that kind of subsidy is to target it better. So if we had a good handle on who in this economy, and maybe the Ministry of Social Services knows this, who are those people that really need assistance? And countries that do this well have really good social safety nets, because what you want to do is not allow, and I'm going to sound crazy here, but not allow people who live in Albany to benefit from a subsidy that someone who lives in a vulnerable neighborhood, I don't want to call any
Okay, fair
names,
enough.
but you don't want them to be benefiting equally, because the people who live in Albany don't need the subsidy,
Right.
right? So we know that on an income basis, the people in Albany, and I'm being very general here, and no hardship to anybody who lives in Albany.
Albany, Life Key.
Wherever,
people
right?
of a higher income base.
I'm only using that as a metaphor to say that you don't want to offer those same benefits because it is not fair. So
Okay.
that's where economists would say target the benefits to really get to the people who need them. So
Sound like you saying we need income tax.
I'm going to get to that.
Okay. I jumped the gun. I'm sorry.
I'm going to get to that, but not just quite yet.
Okay.
I think what, obviously, from a country that went from virtually no taxes or very limited taxes, only collecting customs duties and stamp duties, to moving to indirect taxes like VAT, which is obviously we all pay. It's based. You consume, you're going to pay VAT.
Right.
You import, you're going to pay VAT. If
Right.
you're a business, whatever, you're going to pay VAT. So it's across the board. But what I want to say, the more substantive point is a developing country like the Bahamas, and yes, we have a high GDP per capita, so you may say we're not really developing, we're developed. No, we're not. We're still developing.
Right.
And there are a lot of ways to measure that. But if you look at the average tax revenue to GDP for OECD countries. And I picked the OECD countries just to say countries that are more developed than ours: Canada, Mexico, the UK, all the European countries, a bunch of countries that belong to that group. On average, their revenue to GDP is about 33%.
Okay.
Ours is less than 24%. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, in the communication, the target, which was 25% of GDP, has been lowered to 23.6% of GDP. And the explanation used by the PM, and I think I am still trying to wrap my head around the explanation he gave, has to do with revisions that were made by the statistical department. It doesn't really matter to me if the GDP methodology has changed. The administration cannot arbitrarily reduce the target without saying to Parliament, we need to reduce the target. That's because we have a fiscal responsibility legislation.
Yes.
And so when you want to make an adjustment like that, it should be discussed in Parliament, and everybody needs to agree. So you cannot unilaterally say, well, I'll reduce the target to 23.6 because maybe that's within our reach, when it should be 25%. Because if you're following the law, and if you want to get to the target of 60% of GDP, which is the debt ratio target that they're aiming for by, I think he said,
I may have said 2027.
2028 or
27,
9. No,
20.
no,
Oh,
it was
it's 8 or
kind
9?
of, it was way out there.
Okay.
I think he said
I don't know why
28 or
2027. Okay.
Anyway, however, so I think that's something that we can't just skip over. It's worth discussing.
Okay.
Just because the Fiscal Council, which we mentioned earlier, the Fiscal Council is really, their job is to do an independent assessment of this budget and say independently what they think.
But he didn't mention anything about them in his communication at all.
No, it didn't come up, but I would like to remind Bahamians that the Fiscal Council was appointed in February of this year. That's as far as I got with my research earlier today. I don't think there's a commissioner appointed yet, but I know the council has been.
I think they were supposed to elect a commission among themselves.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But the point is, the Fiscal Council now needs to take this document and say to the Bahamian public, does this make sense? Because it's their job to do it. So I want to just remind everyone that we have this new institution whose job it is to hold the current administration, whoever they are, accountable for the data and the way that this is presented.
But by you bringing the fiscal council, have they even met? I mean, I know when they were appointed, and that's it. I don't know. I couldn't tell you right now who's on the council. I don't know if they've been, enacted or anything. I don't know even if they had their first meeting.
So I think it's worth asking those questions because I found it odd that there was no reference to when we can expect something from the Fiscal Council, because as an economist, and there are many economists around who can also give their opinions about the budget, but we have an institution that we've established to make commentary on and analysis on the budget, and not just on the budget at a point in time, but it's their job to be monitoring
As it goes on.
Correct. So that's why we formed the council. The council is a very, very important part of our fiscal discipline mechanisms. And so as we have it, I think we all look forward to seeing, one, how it's operationalized, but two, their first report.
Go ahead.
Earl, so I think this budget has a lot in it that needs to be digested. On the narrative, I think the PM did hit, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think he hit on some important issues, trying to protect Bahamians from the impact of, say, increasing tariffs that are coming because of the geopolitical shifts that are happening in trade policy around the world. That's important. The Bahamas, we don't produce anything. We import 99% of what we consume, so we're going to be affected. What I would caution against is this is a super blunt instrument, right? So it's really difficult for governments to put a rein on prices. The only thing they can control is what they're collecting in taxes. So the fact that we've seen reductions in VAT, we're in this budget, we've seen some exemptions being offered. For example, if you want to import a high efficient air conditioner
Yeah.
or refrigerator
Yeah,
or washing
yeah.
machine, I think they're going to be exempted from duty.
Duty free, not VAT free,
Duty
but
free,
duty
but
free.
you've got to pay VAT on it.
Uh-huh.
So there are limited ways in which the government can do this. What I would caution, all of these, what I would, just a short form of saying this, it's not pejorative. The giveaways need to be quantified. So typically and I'm sure the Ministry of Finance has a team that's done this.
Yes.
But it would be good because normally, let's say I was the IMF economist trying to analyze this budget, I'd say to you, so I need you to tell me for each of those giveaways or tax breaks, how much is it going to cost?
How much money we going to lose
Exactly.
in terms of revenue?
Because this budget also does not have any increases in taxes, right? So they made a big deal of that. This is no new taxes.
Nothing that we can see plain yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
So, but it would be good to share with the public exactly what each of those items cost. Because, again, going back to the previous conversation, and by the way, I happened to only be listening in because I was in the car stuck in traffic and I could hear the whole conversation. But the reductions in VAT on whether it's prescription drugs or all those items I talked about, we heard a lot about that, but we didn't hear much in the budget, and maybe this is coming after, on what's happening on the expenditure side of the budget. So remember, there are always two sides to the budget.
Right.
It's what the government's taking in, that's the revenue side, so taxes and so on, VAT, which we all know about. And then on the other side of the balance sheet, there is what is the government spending its money on. And I mentioned two already, wages and salaries.
Yeah.
There is an explanation for the bump in wages and salaries this year, which is the changes to NIB, and so that causes, but that needs analyzing too, because
Yes.
remember, wages and salaries, there are two components. How many people are on the establishment, meaning how many workers actually on the books, and then, the average salary and so on, and how much of that is really NIB or how much is that are new hires. And that's, again, that's
Or raises given to
or raises.
public
But,
servant.
yeah.
Okay.
But you normally can figure that out pretty easily if you know sort of what are some of the agreed increases through some of these contracts that have been signed recently, say with the doctors or nurses and so on. There are parts of the wages and salaries bit that are, we hire teachers, we hire policemen, we hire nurses, we hire doctors, we hire mechanics, engineers, all those things. There's a number of people that we know have to support the government's business, but then we also know, like every government around the world, there's not a single government around the world that doesn't have fat around some of the employees, right?
Uh-huh.
And the other piece to this is, I want to say within this recent administration, but going even further back to the previous one, the shift towards digital transformation in this country is moving like molasses, right?
Yes.
There's still far more that we ought to be able to do, Bahamians ought to be able to do, interacting with the government online
Yes.
through secure networks, than having to present yourself in a government office.
Yes.
And I can give some personal examples. Yesterday,
You and half of us.
I know, having to go to Customs Department twice in a couple of hours because I got 2 invoices, and then as soon as I got home, having been to the office to pay the invoice, another one dropped in my mailbox and said, "What is this?" Another invoice. I had to go back. So I had to make 2 trips. But if I could just log on to the Customs website,
You're supposed to be able to do that, but how efficient is it? Is the question.
no, but that's the whole
Problem.
idea behind making sure that government services are done properly through a really good digital network. I mean, parts work really well if you want to get your passport done,
Yeah.
driver's license renewed. Those things are beautiful. They work. But there are other aspects, I think, that we can speed up. There are other things like medical records and educational records. There's a lot that we haven't done, I think, that could speed up and make this economy more efficient. The other thing about the budget, and here, talking about this efficiency that caught my attention was the attempt to modernization was the word that's used in the
Yes.
communication.
They use that. Everybody uses that.
If we're going to modernize this economy, the only way to do it is on a digital platform.
Amen. We got to pay some bills.
Okay.
And see, he's dropped this little thing in my head and say, hey, time to pay bills. But when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about, go back to, we talked about earlier about the surplus. Because I know in the midterm budget, 6 months midterm budgets, there were some arrests that were mentioned. But I didn't hear anything about that in this communication. So I know there's ways to, and for lack of a better way, cook the books to make it look good. And I want to talk about that in a little bit. We'll take a break. My special guest is Therese Turner-Jones, economist. I'm here on Talking Heads with Pearlie. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we talk a little more about this budget communication. Stay there. Don't go nowhere.
Taking my time on my ride. Taking my time on my ride. I die for you, that's easy to say. We have a list of people that we would take.
Turn up the heat and the flavor with the new jalapeno fire from KFC. Punch into the iconic taste of KFC's original recipe, extra large filet that's made with KFC's secret recipe of 11 herbs and spices cooked to perfection. Stacked high with spicy jalapeno peppers, pepper jack cheese, and our cool but kickin' jalapeno sauce, all wrapped up in a soft toasted brioche bun. Go bolder and crank up the heat with our spicy zinger filet. The new jalapeno fire is bringing the heat and it's finger licking good.
Cancer Treatment Centers of America is now City of Hope, creating one of the leading cancer care and research networks from coast to coast, providing more of what you need. More locations means more care closer to home. More specialists mean more expertise. More research means more breakthroughs. More advancements means more treatment options. And more options means more hope. Learn more at cancercenter.com.
Measles is on the rise around the world, and the Bahamas is at risk.
Which makes us very vulnerable as a nation for the possible outbreak of measles cases.
Every Saturday in May from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., the Ministry of Health and Wellness will host MMR immunization visits in South Beach, Coconut Grove, Fox Hill, and Elizabeth Estates. Clinics in these areas will remain open until 8 p.m. twice per week. Get your child immunized now.
We're still here. Since 1941, the Armory Company has been your trusted partner and one-stop solution for all your business and technology needs. From printers to copier leasing, point of sale to cloud video surveillance, and access control to ATMs, we've got it all. And we ship to all family islands. Call our dedicated customer service team now at 397-1600 or visit us behind Wendy's on Mackey Street and experience excellence that stands the test of time. The Armory Company. Your success is our business.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time again from the island that gives you mince mutton, okra soup, and of course flour cake and rake and scrape. It's the 26th annual Cat Island Rake and Scrape Festival in beautiful Artistown, Cat Island, June 6th through 8th. We have acts such as Veronica Bishop,
He come here with the hands swinging.
Gino D, Stelito, Cupid, and of course our very own down home guys like Lacido and the Boys,
I don't like no rigging and scraping in here.
Ophi and the websites, and much more in beautiful Artistown, Cat Island. June 6th through 8th. See you there.
You're listening to Talking Heads with Naughty, hosted by Earl the Pearl. On Guardian Radio, 96.9 FM.
And welcome back to Talking Heads Thursday here with Pearlie on Guardian Radio 96.9. I I know you wasn't used to this deep talk, right? But this sometimes is something like this that we need to get into so we have a better understanding and we don't just hear the fluff and the sweet talk about a budget when we need to understand just how it affects you or I. With that saying, I want to get into the surplus, but let's take this call first and then we'll get into that. Call you on the air.
Prince.
Hey.
What's happening to your co-host?
Hi, GNN. How you doing?
This GNN Grammy boy.
Ghetto News Network.
And you know,
Grammy boy.
To tell you, the truth don't need no extra egg. It can stand on by itself. But I can tell you my personal story, because a lot of people think as we call in the radio station, calling their name, talking food.
Okay.
But let me tell you about my story. When I used to shop, when I was a good walker, I could walk up my leg, trying to get eaten out.
The age thing don't
age don't play. I used to go in the value store,
Uh-huh.
and while I get my trolley and my list, I go to the fruit counter and grab my little pack of grapes. I want pick as I shop.
I got you.
Now those grapes used to cost me between $5 and $6. You know the little tray of grapes, right?
Yeah, you ain't eating them and there's not paying for it. You keeping the thing and scanning it in your
I'm
reach.
keeping the thing to give to the cashier. I always did that.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
And this time, I gone straight to after the 5% decrease in the food store the other day. I go on in there. I said, boy, my grapes can cost me $1 or $3. Go on for my grapes, Freddie, and the co-host. The grapes, they gone down 5%, but the grapes was down almost $15.
Wait. From $5 to $15?
From 5 something
to
almost $15, and then the man tell me I can save because he put down 5%. The grapes was still double what the price it was cost after the 5% come off.
Okay.
You think that make any sense, really?
Not to me.
Okay, so that is exactly what they're doing with us. Talking about all these prices, like your co-host asking. I wonder what they can cut or where they get this money from. That's where they're getting it from. Between there and NIB, they get if the grapes gone from $5 to $15 and only $1 something more, then he getting double his VAT. Or triple his VAT
So with $5 you're paying 50 cents, right? At 10%. With $5 you're paying 50 cents and 10%.
Exactly.
With $15 you're paying 75 cents with 5%.
So that's which means
so the man's getting 25 cents more.
Whoever collecting the VAT getting more. So that's where the money coming from, and they playing sleight of hand.
Okay.
That's my experience. You understand what I experienced?
I got you.
Prices obviously going up.
So Earl, let me interject here. So you're right. So I made a point earlier that the Bahamas imports almost everything we consume, and especially food, because we don't grow grapes. So you have to, those imported grapes you're eating come either from Chile or they come from California, or they're from somewhere else. They're not from Carmichael Road. So you're paying for the inflationary impact of the changes in not just tariffs, but there's been a lot of agricultural, how do you put it? There's been a lot of the impact of climate change on agriculture, especially in California, either because of droughts or too much rain, has forced agricultural produce to inflate very rapidly in the U.S. of late. So this is not maybe you're feeling the impact now with the grapes, but this is something that I think we're all going to have to become more sensitive to because of other things, supply chain shortages, but now it's because of other things. So that's something we have to always be thinking about when we go shopping. If you see the grapes at 15, you may think, oh my God, no, I'm not buying grapes this week. Let me buy something else. And I think that's the approach that people who are trying to manage their budgets have to be more careful about how we do our shopping now. You just can't go pick up the stuff that you were putting in your tray, let's say, 2 months ago. You have to be more cautious.
They fooled GNN because I go and run for the grape. I thought it could be $3 to 31 more thing. Where in which countries do you know that you could go in a food store, in one food store, and 10% on the mop and 5% on the meat, even though it's gone up double?
Mm-hmm.
So you pay 2 different set of VAT in one food store. Where else in the world you know that's happened?
You know, but that happened anywhere else.
All right, so I have a lot of views on this. I'm not a big fan of differentiated VAT rates. Okay? Most economists who advise governments on how to implement VATs, one flat rate is always better than a lot of different rates. But I think, and I think it could be, it seems more palatable if we say on bread basket items, it's 5%. In my opinion, it's either 0 or 10. It shouldn't be 5. It should be 0 or 10, not anything in between. It gets very complicated, not just for the shopkeeper, but for the consumer to be managing all these different rates in our heads. And at the end of the day, what we do, we don't manage the rates in our head. We just go and buy the stuff that we need to buy.
Thank you.
And there are all these different rates. So
Thank you all for taking my call.
Yes.
Thank you, G, and I appreciate you.
Can I say
Go
something?
ahead, yeah.
I wanted to make a point about, I'm putting on a different hat, and I'm a board member of ORG. I think most Bahamians know what ORG stands for, which is it's a civil society group. It's trying to promote governance around especially public financial management in the country. And one of the initiatives ORG has is a program called Be Clear. And the idea is to empower Bahamians, anybody from any walk of life, to be able to understand the budget in very clear, simple terms.
Yeah.
And so we've got a website, and if you go to the org website, or if you contact
We've had your leader, what's his name?
Matt Aubrey.
Matt, right. We've had Matt on before.
Matt's been an absolute fantastic advocate.
Yeah.
But then there are others, and the team working on this work, they're an excellent set of young people who are out there working hard to make sure that Bahamians can understand these things. So I just want to push that.
Yeah.
But in our conversation this morning with Ariana, who is our communications person, we talked about the fact that some countries do what's known as a people's budget. So if you notice, the communication itself, I don't remember how many pages.
64.
64 pages. The draft estimate document is 300 pages.
Yes.
Okay, so that would tax even people like me, right? But because I'm a nerd, I will probably go through the 300 pages.
I don't know that I'm a nerdy, but anyway, go ahead.
300 pages to understand it. But what some countries do is they publish something called a people's budget, which can be a supplement that is in the Guardian
like
or in the Tribune or
Snapchats.
whatever. Yeah, but very easy to understand terms. Using graphics, so you don't even have to be that literate to be able to understand it. They put the numbers there, so you know how much you're spending on schools, how much you're spending on hospitals, how much I'm spending on whatever.
That's something former Minister of Finance Peter Turnquist brought.
Correct.
And he brought the little Snapchat, these little things come out,
Right.
trying to give you a simpler look at the budget.
And the reason for doing that, apart from wanting to communicate with your public, is also to get more civic engagement.
Yes.
Because when citizens feel as if they understand what their administrators are doing, you can get the partnership that Minister Sears was talking about earlier. Sorry to keep going back to him, but he made some really important points.
He's my MP, so that's fine.
Yeah, that's right. And but the important thing is that partnership, the basis for a good partnership is always trust. And the basis of a good functioning democracy is one that's built on trust. And if people trust their institutions, meaning they trust the police, they trust the Ministry of Finance, they trust the government, they trust our judicial system, you're going to get more buy-in, more ownership of what it is that the country is about and how we're going to do it collectively. In hard times, and let's go back to the pandemic, because that also came up. In hard times, trust is really important. And I think what we saw in the Caribbean during the pandemic is how much Caribbean people and Bahamian people trusted their health authorities, one. So we got vaccinated. We listened to the directives not to leave the house and the lock-ins and all of that. But that trust can only come if you believe that what it is that my government's telling me, one, it's the truth. It can be fact checked, right? So the data that's in those 300 pages of estimates and so on must be in a way that I can understand it. It makes sense. because I personally trust the people at the Ministry of Finance, they're really good technicians there, that information is accurate and there's no hanky-panky. The other piece to this is we have to also acknowledge in countries like ours that we have lots of institutions like this, right? So we have an Auditor General. Auditor General is to bring to the attention of the public when there is a report done on an agency or a project that the community may have concerns about, and people are saying, well, why did it cost $20 million more when they told us it would cost $100 million? That's the Auditor General's job, to go in and do the hard work of saying what the overruns were related to, right?
But ever since they retired Terran Bastia, we hear nothing from the Auditor General.
Well, that's a point to be raised.
Right.
But I think we have these institutions, and we have to trust that those institutions are being managed in a way and given the independent reign that they need to do the work, so that, the Bahamian government, the administration, and let me put it this way, the administration is accountable to the people at the end of the day. And as a taxpayer, you want to know that you're actually paying taxes for goods and services that are worth having. So, and I recall having these conversations with my family a lot, and Earl, you know this. We bellyache about bad roads. We bellyache about the state of PMH. We bellyache about water. We bellyache about electricity costs. But, part of the bellyaching has to do with finite resources. A government can only provide its citizens if we, as taxpayers, pay our taxes. So when you get your property tax, you pay it on time. When you get, VAT, you pay it on time. Businesses, please file your taxes on time. That's the part of the partnership that I think sometimes we leave out of the equation, that we are also responsible for doing our bit by paying our taxes, but then being able to hold our administrators accountable for what it is that they are actually producing. And here, I'd just say one last thing on this. This is where procurement policy and laws are very
So the
important.
Procurement Act
Very, very
needs
important.
to be followed, which they don't follow.
Needs to be followed. I think it's very concerning that we have more single source bids.
No bid contracts.
Or
Let's
no
be
bid
real with it.
contracts. with
One
no bid
company
con-
getting $356 million.
That's
No bid.
concerning. However, we need to talk about that.
Yes.
If it's a trend, we need to ask the Auditor General, please give us a report on this.
Yeah.
Right? And so that I think sometimes we go to the polls, we elect a set of administrators, and we let them run whatever they want to do for 5 years. And at the time of the election, we start saying all the things we don't like. But we have options. We have institutions that are here to protect taxpayers. I also think about an institution like IRCA, which is the utilities regulator. If you are upset because your internet is down more than it should be up and you're paying your bill, you send a letter to IRCA and say, you know what? Whatever company is not providing me the internet on time. The same with electricity, the same with water, the same with all, because that's what they're there
That's
for.
their job.
Their job is to regulate the utilities in the interest of the Bahamian public.
Let's take this caller. Call you on the air.
I think that's my boy there on there. How come in there?
Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon, Pearlie.
How you doing?
Right here, Sparky. Pearlie, I really thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to voice my opinion on your phone. I really appreciate the way you handled your talk show.
You swell my head every time you call, but I appreciate that, brother. Tell me what you got to say.
Yeah, because I tell you, when you say give me, at least you only say I got 30 seconds.
I can give you 30 seconds if you don't tell me what you want to say. What's up?
That's the good thing between a soccer and a big government hire.
Yes.
We got respect for one another.
Yes, we do.
Y'all was number 2, we was number 1.
In your opinion. So what you saying?
But then, what I was trying to say is, I wonder sometimes, Pearlie, like you take time to question, no matter what government in power, whether it's UEP, DNA, FNM, PLP, you don't shy from none.
No.
And you allow us to speak. Whatever we are, we don't have to say, I this and I that.
No, you don't. Just tell me what's on your mind. But I still waiting you to tell me what's on your mind.
People that they hog up your shows, like some people from Freeport, and this one and the next one and everything, and you give Sparky 30 seconds.
All right.
But what I'm saying is sometimes I beg you to allow me to say what I got to say.
But I want you to say what you say, but you keep telling me the same thing.
But see,
I'm giving you the time, Sparky.
To get them out of the way.
Okay, go ahead, Sparky.
Now, it scares me, Pearly, to know that the situation we are in this country now, whether it's the PLP running things, the F&M want to take over things, the DNA, the COI, and the UEP, the problem is, to me, the Bahamian people are in a dilemma.
Okay.
I saw a video the other day from the leader of the COI going into a shanty town. I don't know if you saw it.
I've seen a lot of stuff with it, but I try to pay attention to what everybody's saying.
The last one I saw, he was going down to a shanty town in the southern part of New Providence. Apparently, they was having a cockfight.
Okay.
The amount of cars that was lined up and the amount of Haitian nationals that was down there, it scares me to know that our defense force, our police force, our immigration force, our religious leaders, social leaders, and political leaders don't know that we have 27 shanty towns in the southern end of New Providence.
Well, Sparky, if you know that, they know that. If you know that, they know that.
But it scares me that nobody's doing anything.
That should tell you something.
And if they have a revolution going on in Haiti right now, where the rebels are up against the government, what happens if something happened in the Bahamas in 1987, cut off by many gated communities, which lower the size of New Providence, and all of the rest of the Bahamians are caught up in the middle of New Providence like McCullough Corner thing. What happened if a majority of foreigners take us one night, who is kill people with cutlass and throw and burn you with gas in the middle of Rawson Square? What would happen to Bahamian people?
That ain't gonna happen. That ain't gonna happen. Therese, you can't go nowhere. You need to stay and come back on the half because we got a couple more things we need to talk about.
That's right.
The sports people have to be mad at me today, but this is too important for us just to get into some more meat of this budget communication. So we're gonna take a break. Cuban Willie got us numerical predictions. We're going to take a break. This is Pearly on Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. We got the news to break. My special guest, Therese Turner-Jones, economist, will be back, and we're going to talk some more about our budget and what's coming up and what can we expect in our country over the next year. Please don't go nowhere. Stay right there.
Coming through metaphorically, I'm the man, but literally I don't know what I do. I live for you, and that's hard to do. Even harder to say when you know it's not true. Even harder to write when you know that tonight there were people back home.
All I do is win, no matter what.
Feeling lucky? Here's Cuban Willie's numerology report. Brought to you by the Island Game.
Wepa, soy Joe Cuban Willie, and it's Thursday, and it's time for the Phobos, the Cuatro Pelotas. And your Phobos today?
1911, 1911. 1911.
That's your Phobos for today. Play it and win with the Island Game. Stay winning, my friend.
Turn up the heat and the flavor with the new jalapeno fire from KFC. Crunch into the iconic taste of KFC's original recipe, extra large filet that's made with KFC's secret recipe of 11 herbs and spices cooked to perfection. Stacked high with spicy jalapeno peppers, pepper jack cheese, and our cool but kickin' jalapeno sauce, all wrapped up in a soft toasted brioche bun. Go bolder and crank up the heat with our spicy zinger filet. The new jalapeno fire is bringing the heat, and it's finger-licking good.
John Shoes and Accessories is your one-stop shop for all your footwear needs. You will find what you're looking for among the growing collection of classic and trendy styles with new arrivals every week. John's covers the whole family and has great prices, helpful and friendly customer service. Your experience shopping with us will be time well spent. Shop with us online at www.johnshoes.com. John's also now carries small home appliances, so come on into John's, located on Rosetta Street in Palmdale and Carmichael Road West. John's, we put fashion at your feet.
The 2025 Samuel P. Hagan High School Soccer Nationals are here. May 15th through 16th in Grand Bahama. May 21st through 30th in Nassau at the Roscoe A.L. Davies Field. Top teams from Nassau, Freeport, Eleuthera, and Abaco battle for the crown in the Duncan Girls and J.S. Johnson Boys divisions. Calling all junior Junction groups. Come out, bring the vibes, and rep your school. Inclusive matches, music, food, and family fun daily. Gates open at 3 p.m. Visit bahamasfa.net. Be there.
You're listening to Talking Heads with Naughty, hosted by Earl the Pearl. On Guardian Radio, 96.9 FM.
Talking Heads with Naughty is brought to you by the Bahamas Football Association, Burger King, the Cat Island Rake and Scrape Festival, City of Hope, Fine Threads, John's Department Store, Joker's Wild, KFC, Muffler World, Nassau Cruise Port, Naughty Johnny's, Percy's Island Games, Pinder Tile, Print Masters, Sandcastle Bahamas, Tropical Gyros, and the Water and Sewage Corporation.
My time on my ride. Oh, 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 I'm falling, so I'm taking my time on my ride. Taking my time on my ride. I die for you, that's easy to say. We have a list of people that we would take for them, for you, for everybody in this room, but they don't seem to see many coming through. See many coming through. Metaphorically, I'm the man, but literally, I don't know what I do. I live for you, and that's hard to do. Even harder to say when you know it's not true. Even harder to write when you know that tonight there were people back home who tried talking to you, but then you ignore them still. All these questions, they're for real. Like, who would you live for? Who would you die for? And would you ever? Oh, 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 I'm falling, so I'm taking my time on my ride. Oh, 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 I'm falling, so I'm taking my time. Taking my time on my ride. So I'm taking my time on my ride. Oh, I'm falling, so I'm taking my time on my. I've been thinking too much. Help me. I've been thinking too much. Help me. I've been thinking too much. I've been thinking too much. I've been thinking too much. Help me. I've been thinking too much. I've been thinking too much. I've been thinking too much. Help me. Taking my time on my ride. Oh, 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 I'm falling, so I'm taking my time on my ride.
And welcome back. Guardian Radio 96.9, Talking Heads. This is Pearly here with you. Jeff, all you sports fans, just bear with us today, okay? I know I give Naughty hell for going over, but Pearly got to go over today because this to me is too important for us not to talk more about. This is our life. This is how we're going to live for the next year. So we need to make sure that we're going in the right direction. And this could possibly be the last this government puts out. And you know, listening to other shows in which Chivago had to say, I had to agree with him. It's interesting this is interesting to much to know that this could be an election budget. The Prime Minister talked, and my special guest, once again, I want to know, Therese Turner-Jones, economist, real experience when it comes to this kind of stuff, somebody who's worked around the world, who's worked with many governments and many economies, so has a clear understanding of what is needed. The Prime Minister spoke about a surplus, and it got to me to know that while he's bragged about increasing revenue, but I see an increase in expenditure, And some people believe, you have a surplus, but I hear vendors complaining they're not getting the money, police reservists not getting the money, nurses, doctors. A lot of people are not receiving vendors are not receiving their funds. And a lot of times, people would, a prime example, the Pony called the show yesterday and said, I don't know how to manage your economy, but I manage my house. And he said, sometimes I go to my wife and say, babes, we got some extra money today, but we ain't gonna fix that boxing with break. We ain't gonna fix the leak in the bathroom. We can miss one loan payment this week so we can have some extra money. I get the impression that our government doing the same thing that over the last 6 months may not have paid some bills to give us this look that of a surplus. And back in the 80s, we used to call our economy a false economy because it was a drug economy. I'm beginning to think something to me, to Pearlie, and this is my view now. Something ain't right there. They ain't balancing right to me. Or in the words of it ain't math, the math are not mathing right now. Help me understand this, please. Just help me understand it.
Yeah, the math, not mathing. So, obviously, the devil's in the details.
Yes.
The communication is one thing. The 300 pages of the draft estimates and the revenues is another thing. In the 6-month
presentation
that was made,
midterm budget report.
The midterm budget report.
There were some arrears there, right?
There were some annexes that included what I thought were a fair amount of arrears. So I think that has to be taken into account. I want to say at the end of the day, though, you can't really fool. You can fool some people, but you
can fool some people some of the time. You can't fool all the people all the time, or
so
something like that, right?
And I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt that this is not. It's difficult to officially pad a budget. So I want to take the numbers at face value.
Okay.
And in the summary table on the 300-page document, there's definitely a surplus recorded there. So I think that it's a projection, because it's a projection for 25-26.
Yes.
So we're not talking about.
But next year this time we should see there's a surplus.
Next year this time we should see a surplus. So the question is, at the end of each budget year, there will be a report on the actual outturn. And we always expect changes, because today is May 29th, a couple more days left in this month. More monies can come in. A lot of the expenditures may not have been, as you're saying, there's some bills that they've held back, warrants that have not maybe issued but not paid against. There are suppliers who still need to be paid. So once all those things are done, and by the way, if the treasurer does their job properly, and I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that you are going to do your job properly.
And I'm trying not to comment, but go ahead.
Let's just say that we hope not to see too many deviations in the final outturn of the actual results. Okay. So I think this is, again, something for everyone to be aware of. What the Prime Minister yesterday pronounced on, was it yesterday, yeah?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yesterday was what's projected for the budget for 25-26. So it hasn't happened yet. It's what they're expecting to happen based on where we think GDP is going, where we think the economy is going, how many visitors we're expecting, their new hires, the new policies, the changes in the tax regime that he announced yesterday, all the giveaways or tax breaks, as I call them. When they're putting that together, the people who have assembled these 300 pages of estimates, this is what is projected. So I think it is important to understand where we are in about 2 months' time, when we should have the actual outturn for the full fiscal year.
Yeah, June 30th.
And that report is done.
Mm-hmm. If they do it.
Well,
because there's a report they do that I think they're but 6 months behind, maybe, or maybe 3 months behind. Don't quote me.
This is a requirement under the Fiscal Responsibility Act that report, it's called a fiscal paper, that report needs to be published and shared with the public, and then we'll be able to see if there are any gaps and if the surplus does hold. But it would be extremely risky to project a surplus when so many people are scrutinizing this data.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
Not just Bahamians scrutinizing it, but the IMF, the world, everybody, credit rating agencies. it's not the kind of stuff you want to fudge. I mean, it's
You got to be,
you
because,
don't-
yeah.
you don't get away with that easily. So I'm excited that it's going to be a surplus because I think
I think everybody wants to see that.
Everybody wants to see that, and
But I hope it's not like the words of the street. They ain't selling us a dream.
no. Well, I mean, even if they're selling a dream, I think whenever a budget is presented, people like me like to think about contingencies. So there's a lot of what we call downside risks to this budget because what's happening in the global economy is not pretty. Right. So everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people who follow the World Economic Outlook and the frequent changes and lowering of the global economic outlook, meaning the growth rate for the world economy is actually falling, not increasing, because of the uncertainty, because of trade wars, because of the ongoing unrest in the Middle East and in Ukraine. All of those things are lingering threats to the kind of recovery that the global economy needs, given that, some countries are really just starting to breathe after the pandemic, and given these other shocks, you're like, oh my God, I'm getting suffocated again.
Yeah.
So I think just to say that it's always good to be cautious. Any projections you have to take with a grain of salt, meaning there are always risks to what is presented, and you have to be prepared that things could go sideways for all kinds of reasons. In our case, it could go sideways. We may have a hurricane, another Dorian. The trade wars could escalate. We have no idea. I mean, things seem to be changing by the minute in the U.S., so we have to be careful what the impact that's going to be on us.
They calling Trump taco now. Trump
Correct.
always chickens up. Let me read a couple of texts.
know.
Good day, Pearlie. The VAT deduction in the budget still isn't as low as Minas had it, even though Minas had it at 12%, but there was zero VAT on other things. Now this government has VAT on everything, which is killing the small person. Next text. Good day, Pearlie. The PM could accomplish a surplus next year because numbers on the papers don't lie. They could put what they want to put on the paper.
We just dealt with that.
Somebody told me, I can't say it on there, we can leave it up, but say the paper let you do anything to it. No, that's somebody tell
Except, there's always reputational damage. And I think even the most less serious of governments tend not to put themselves, you don't set yourself up for failure.
Right.
So let's give them the benefit of the doubt that what has been presented is a document. And remember, technicians prepared this document. These estimates are not prepared by politicians. These
Right.
estimates are prepared by technicians. Let's respect the fiscal economists and the hardworking people of the Ministry of Finance and all the people around the ministries who've actually contributed the data to the budget. I think what it is that Bahamians need to focus on is the fact that this has been announced in the way it has been announced. Our job now is to make sure that it gets done in the way that
They said they'll do it.
it's going to be done. These issues around whether it's 0% or 5%, I've already commented on that. In my view, it should either be 0 or 10. Too many rates is too complicated. The fact that the rates are reduced on some essential items, prescription drugs, Bahamian population is really unhealthy,
Yeah.
right? Diabetes, hypertension, cancer, all these
Obesity,
things,
yeah.
obesity. People need to get those drugs to live properly. And so if we can help them improve their health by lowering those drugs so that people take them, because we know if you don't take your diabetes medicine, you know what that can happen.
Tell me about it.
Exactly. So, I mean, those things are super, super important. And here is where, again, I think sometimes the numbers and the narrative need to be elaborated differently. And by this I say, what I would have liked to see on health is here is where we think Bahamians ought to be with their health. We want to see people exercising more. We want to see you eating less salty foods, less fatty foods, less whatever. By the way, here's an opportunity to put increases on things like sugary drinks, fast food. Those are the things, if you want to get some revenue, Bahamians are spending way too much disposable income on fast foods, right? Which are not good for health. And don't tell me that it has to do with time and I don't have time for cooking and all that.
No, it's bull crap. But the air fryer makes the time shorter.
Right. So there are some things, I think we're missing some low-hanging fruit here. But the other thing about the messaging around our health, and I've listened to the Minister of Health talk a lot about the need for Bahamians to adopt healthy lifestyles, less smoking, less drinking, all those things. But exercise is really important. But if people are going to exercise, they need safe places to do it. They need parks. They need good sidewalks. But if you're going to go for a walk, you're not going to end up with a broken ankle.
Yeah.
So there are things around the policies around a healthy population, a healthy worker, that those messages need to come out as much as, well, reducing the cost of your prescription drugs, because remember, prevention is always better than cure. But if you don't get diabetes, that's what I'm aiming for.
Right.
You not to have diabetes, not that when you get diabetes, I can help you out with your drugs.
Right.
That's an upside down way of thinking about health. The right approach about health, in my opinion, is, and most health economists would say, is to put the effort at the prevention stage, right?
It's something Dwayne Sands pushed a lot, but he's Minister of Health.
No, and we hear some messages now too.
Yeah.
Immunization for kids.
Yes.
Exercise, healthy foods, proper diets,
yes.
and so on. And I think if we pushed out, and by the way, there are ways to push out messages around these things so that people are healthier and make the right choices, right? Okay. So before you jump for the whatever drink with the whipped cream on top, if it had the calories, you will think twice about whether you bought that, right? So there are things we can be doing, like putting those labels on foods, so that people know what they're up against. Guava Duff. I shudder to think how much the Guava Duff sauce.
Let me read these texts, because you're trying to discourage me. I love Guava Duff, especially on Betty Young. GA, we can't get, especially Mauricio, let me say that before I get out. GA, we can't get those grapes from the same place we allegedly get the eggs, huh?
That's a good one.
It really, as this one says, I have a number of questions. Can you ask your guests what the 2024 rate of inflation? If it's lower than the 2024 U.S. rate, how is it possible, given that we import almost 100% of our, which comes 90%, which 90% comes from the U.S.? Thirdly, what is the significance of the BNSI production versus expense approach to calculating GDP growth? What impact did it have on the 2024 growth numbers? Does it differ from the approach we historically use? And if it does, can we compare directly against previous growth numbers without adjusting one or the other to account for the differing approaches?
Okay, so this is something that I also need to do some more research, because I saw reference to the change in the methodology, but I'm not 100% sure what was actually done by the Statistical Institute. So I don't want to dive into that, except to say my understanding of the methodological changes have to do with being able to cover more businesses. Because remember, GDP, the definition of gross domestic product, is the aggregate of everything that's produced in the country. It's government expenditure, consumption, so everything that we spend as private consumers, it's investment, and it's exports minus imports. So everything we export minus what we import. Traditionally, the Bahamas has a trade deficit because we don't export goods.
Right.
We export services. Tourism, remember, is a service.
Right.
But if in terms of GDP, tourism is characterized as an export service. So we earn revenue, foreign exchange from tourism, and that counts as
foreign indirect. I call it.
Not foreign indirect investment. Tourism is a service. It's produced locally, and it counts as a credit on our balance of payments. So it's money, always money coming in.
Yes.
The interesting part about the tourism industry is we have to think about something that economists refer to as the value add of tourism. So value add is what portion of all the tourism services that we produce that we actually produce, right? So in other words, the hotel is owned by a foreign entity, right? So what the hotel owner is earning from a bad night is not 100% of that cannot be considered value added
to I understand.
Right?
Right.
So
because that's the foreigner owns it.
Correct.
It's not a Bahamian owned thing.
And the why this is important is because when that foreigner is ready to repatriate profits, right? So let's say a room is $100 and he's charging that $100. Maybe $80 of that he can repatriate as profit. And the $20 that's left over is going to pay for what is called the local component. This is the local value added aspect of a hotel night. And that $20 is going to the maid who's cleaning the room, or the people, anything related to the local component of that room rate, right?
Okay.
That's the piece that we own. That's the value add of tourism.
Okay.
There have been studies on this industry that suggest that in the Caribbean, and I think very much the Bahamas falls into this category too, the value add of tourism is actually negative.
Wow.
And I say that because the government spends a lot of money. It has a huge promotional budget.
Yes.
It provides infrastructure like roads,
Right.
transportation, all these things.
And concessions to the hotel owners.
And the concessions,
Yes.
especially the concessions to
Yeah.
the hotel owners, right? So I want us as a people living in this country to understand why some people may be hurting in this country, right? It's a fabulous thing to have beautiful hotels with infrastructure that Bahamians can also participate in. We can go and have Mother's Day lunches here, there, and everywhere, Father's Day dinners, wherever. But those resorts are to improve, at the end of the day, the welfare of Bahamians, because it's a business operating in the Bahamas, employing Bahamians in the Bahamas, paying taxes to the government, and so on. And that's where we should be extracting value from the industry. And if we don't extract enough value from the industry, we will find that we are actually subsidizing folks who are coming to the Bahamas to enjoy a vacation at the Cove or Albany or wherever they go. That may very well be what we're doing. So I would encourage, and I've said this lots of times in lots of places, more research on our tourism sector to make sure that we extract the most value from it. I know that our tourism officials are constantly looking for, the official term is linkages back to the local economy. And what do we mean by that? How much does the visitor spend on locally produced goods and services? Am I going to Earl's restaurant? Am I buying Earl's straw goods? Am I buying art produced by Bahamians?
A John Canoe piece.
Am I taking advantage of local entertainment, right? And here, I think there's a lot of room for more opportunities so that we can extract more value from tourism. Okay. We are sitting on, it really is a golden egg, but it's a golden egg that we're only just not even cracked the surface. We're nowhere near the yolk in terms of...
We ain't scrambling that.
We ain't scrambling.
Let me read a couple of... We got to take a break, but before we take a break, let me read some of these texts. Pearlie, please tell Sparky, call back tomorrow with the topic. Let's hear the good lady, please. They do my brother so bad, yeah? This is a Talking Heads Thursday with Pearlie and my special guest, Therese Turner-Jones, economist extraordinaire. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to talk some more. I so appreciate this. We'll be right back, people.
So I'm taking my time on my ride. Oh, I'm falling. So I'm taking my time on my ride. Taking my time on my
ride. Been off the WSC grid for over a year? Now's the time to come back and save big. For a limited time only, the Water and Sewage Corporation is offering up to 50% off reconnection fees for customers disconnected for more than 1 year. Don't miss this chance to reconnect and enjoy reliable, quality water service at a discounted rate. Call 302-5599 to learn more. Water and Sewage Corporation, dedicated to dependable, affordable water solutions.
Fancy this, one-of-a-kind Pesto Club sandwiches from Burger King Nassau like you've never tasted before. Choose from a juicy chicken breast or 100% flame-grilled beef patty topped with irresistible fresh pesto spread, cheese, crisp bacon, lettuce, and tomato. Or start your mornings right with the Pesto Chicken Crisp Sandwich for breakfast. It's a delicious chicken patty topped with cheese, tomato, fresh pesto spread on a classic buttery BK croissant. The Pesto Club sandwiches are new, fresh, and only at Burger King Nassau.
John Shoes and Accessories is your one-stop shop for all your footwear needs. You will find what you're looking for among the growing collection of classic and trendy styles with new arrivals every week. John's covers the whole family and has great prices, helpful and friendly customer service. Your experience shopping with us will be time well spent. Shop with us online at www.johnshoes.com. John's also now carries small home appliances, so come on into John's, located on Rosetta Street in Palmdale and Carmichael Road West. John's, we put fashion at your feet.
It's time to give away a cruise. Guardian Media Group and Going Places Travel wants to take you on a 7-day cruise for 4 to Panama, Colombia, Curacao, and Aruba on Royal Caribbean Serenade of the Seas. And here's the best part. No visa required. That's right, no visa required. You have 4 ways to enter, 4 ways to win. Number 1, fill out the form in the Nassau Guardian. Number 2, listen to Star 106.5 and Guardian Radio 96.9. Number 3, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Number 4, or make a purchase at any Going Places Travel. Entry deadline is June 27th, 2025. Drawing will be taking place on July 4th, 2025. So you know what that means? Pack your bags and get ready to soak up the sun and feel the ocean breeze. You and 3 loved ones sailing the high seas on a vacation cruise of a lifetime. Brought to you by the Guardian Media Group and Going Places Travel. Certain conditions apply. Airfare, taxes, and gratuities not included.
You're listening to Talking Heads with Naughty, hosted by Earl the Pearl. On Guardian Radio, 96.9 FM.
And welcome back to our Talking Heads Thursday here with Pearly 96.9. I know you wasn't expecting Pearly could get this deep in. Yeah, I did go to SAC, you know. The PM talked about a lot of data-driven information and an economy that's going to be data-driven. But I'm concerned that we're not getting regular fiscal data. We have a fiscal responsibility bill. We have that these reports supposed to be coming out, but we're getting them 3 months late, 6 months late, 9 months late. We're not getting the benefit of that. And how do we fix that? How do we get to encourage the government? And how do we is there something org needs to do a little more of, so that the people at Bahamas, and going back to what we spoke about, and in particularly giving the snapshots for people to look at, to see for lack of a better way, dumb down a little bit, for people to have a clearer understanding what we're getting. The Prime Minister can get up there and talk and make us feel so good and bomb on the desk and everybody excited. The leader of the opposition can come in and call it an unbalanced budget and he can make his comments and all that. And that's good and we need that. But how does my friend in Chippenham, the fellow who's cleaning my car for me, and make him understand what this budget is all more about? And I think we throw these things out and thinking Bahamians don't care because we don't put it in a way for them to care.
I think, Earl, you hit the nail on the head. So first to say, I'm really impressed by how much interest there is in this budget. So whether it was generated by the communication yesterday or...
Well, the government did a fantastic job of bigging it up before they came there to talk.
But that's a good thing because it seems like it's top of mind for everybody I've met in the last 24 hours, right? Everybody's talking about the budget. that's really a good thing because, as I said earlier, the more civic engagement, the better it is. The more everybody, every Bahamian, no matter where you are, whatever walk of life, you understand that how the government spends its money and how it earns its money is important because there are always messages embedded in where those monies get allocated, right? So I'm very encouraged by the interest and also by, radio programs like this that are willing to tackle this subject because we've come quite a long way in our history of transparency and the use of data. Now, we don't use data enough, in my opinion. If we use data more, things would become even clearer, right? But I think the reluctance to use data by politicians is sometimes they're not comfortable with it, right? Like a lot of people can't do math, right? A lot of people don't know what a percentage means, right? So if I say it's 10% of that or it's 15% of that and it's a share of this and a share, well, people will nod their heads, but do they really understand? And I'm not belittling anybody. I just think not everyone is numerate in that way that they are comfortable with data. So, and that starts with everybody I know. So it's not just I'm categorizing smart people with non-smart people. That's not what I'm saying. I just think some people are not quite prepared for it. Some of us are like data, and like me, you show me a page of numbers and charts, and I can tell you what the story is.
Okay.
Other people need 5 pages of narrative to tell the same story. So we're different kind of learners or understanders, right?
And because this is supposed to be sports, I'm going to make an analogy to sports.
Yes.
In baseball, I love the analytics. I love the data. On base percentage, walks, average war, your ERA, and all that. That analytics, and you talk about it, and they can tell you this amount of home runs hit. It's important. So, as I look at it in the sports way, we need to look at it more in the real life or in our everyday living.
Absolutely. So here are some data that I think every Bahamian should have top of mind. What's our debt to GDP ratio? Everybody should know what that number is.
And explain to them what you mean by that.
And what I mean by that is, so for a country of our size, the rule of thumb is that the debt to GDP, so what the government owes, the stock of money that they borrow from, whether they borrow it from CIBC or they borrow it from JP Morgan Bank in New York, the stock of that debt ideally should not exceed 60% of our gross domestic product. GDP is the term we use for all the thing I discussed earlier, right? And why 60%? Because for every dollar that you borrow, you are paying interest on those borrowings. It's the same way you
buy a car, you mortgage,
so on. There's an interest, so you're paying something extra for what you've borrowed. And because countries sometimes have economic shocks, the pandemic, global recession, trade war, it's not a straight line that you're walking all the time. So you may think, those projections would have me going towards a surplus by the end of next year, fiscal year. Something's going to happen that's going to turn those projections upside down. And it can be as simple as the U.S. government saying to their citizens, don't travel to the Bahamas, right? That will have an impact as bad as the pandemic, right? Because we know that almost 90% of our visitors come from the United States of America. So you always have to be prepared for worst case scenarios. So if you're spending most of your revenues on repaying debt because the interest costs are rising with time, and if you don't have a good credit rating, and by the way, we used to have a AAA credit rating some time ago, but we lost that.
Some time ago.
Some time ago. We lost that because we've had shocks. We've had economic shocks that have caused the deficit to rise, the debt to rise, and so on. We've had those shocks, and so we know what it is to be scraping around to pay bills, right? Now, fortunately, the Bahamas government has a really good record of not defaulting on any loans. And that's really important because the minute you stop paying your loans to an external creditor, you may as well say Delia, whatever the expression is in the Bahamas, Delia gone, right?
Delia wrote the note.
Delia wrote the note. So we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that our government's always in a position to pay its bills, because then that affects our reputation. Our international investors see that, okay, this government's really serious. They pay their bills. Things are done in an orderly fashion. Taxes don't come up. They're not introducing new taxes in the middle of a fiscal year because they're running into trouble. The Bahamas has a really good track record of fiscal management, whether that's the prevailing view or not by people, that we have a good track record on fiscal management. We've always had very conservative approaches to the budget, meaning we only in extreme circumstances, and I say that, the pandemic, the global recession, we saw where the ballooning of the fiscal deficit. But traditionally, I think most our fiscal managers have done a good job to keep that deficit within a reasonable range, except in those extreme circumstances we've had these external shocks.
Okay.
So that's why it's important. So the debt to GDP ratio is important because that means we won't have leftover money to spend on new schools, new roads, fixing things. So that number is important. Inflation number, one of your callers asked about it. Why is ours, I think he said, why is it lower than the U.S.? I don't think that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall the inflation number.
He's asking if it was lower.
It's hard for it to be lower in the Bahamas than it is in the U.S. because of everything is imported. And remember, even though
we're affected by them. If they sneeze, we get a cold.
Correct. And also because in addition to the costs that they're experiencing, the increases in costs they may be experiencing, then we have to add on freight and other things. Then it's always something extra. That's an important number that Bahamians should keep in mind. So a good rule of thumb around where inflation should be. In the U.S., the Fed has an inflation band of between 2 and 4%. So we want to be not so far out of that. I would say inflation really in a country like ours shouldn't be more than 4 to 5%. And even that's kind of high, right?
Let's take this call.
Between 2 and 3 would be even better.
Okay. Call you on the air.
Yeah, good evening, Pearlie.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, good evening to your guest.
Thank you.
Yeah, Pearlie, I love this lady. I was listening all the while.
Mm-hmm.
And as it relates to what Michael Pintard was saying, and I listen to Lang and other people, but I really want countries where the debt to GDP exceeds 60%, and in some cases, places like Japan and America, I get 100%, and they're still functioning. So I'm quite intrigued here, and I'm learning. But now the question for me is, as it relates to the debt to GDP, right? And like government expenditures, and then I want to know, like, as it relates to government payout for government workers, or governmental entities, like government payroll.
Uh-huh.
Is there a threshold for that that determines how healthy the economy is? Because the IMF and certain other entities, I'm not even sure it's the IMF, but they were saying that the government is overbloated, the civil service is bloated, right? And I just would like to respond to that because some countries, like I say, some countries that the GDP is very high and they're still able to function, is that they are different type economies, like they're driven different, and why they're able to cope with it for so long, because it was going on for a long time.
Super.
And secondly, I just want to get this in. Changing of thought here. I wanted to get this in as it relates to the government debt. Is it the foreign debt? How is it classified? Is it your foreign debt and local debt? Just explain it if she know what I mean. Just
she does.
Expound. I'll hang up and listen.
All right. Thank you, 52. Always a pleasure to hear you, brother.
Thank you. Those are such good questions. So just today, there's a piece in the New York Times about Japan's debt being twice its GDP, which means that it's over 200%. Your question is so insightful because why is it that Japan and the U.S. can have debt to GDP ratios that are extremely high and they seem to get on? The big difference is, in the case of the U.S., it's a reserve currency, and this is pretty technical, but what it means is that more people are willing to hold the U.S. dollar because of the stability of the U.S. economy, the size of the U.S. economy. Remember, it's the biggest economy in the world. The U.S. economy, I just saw these numbers the other day, but let's say it's 31 trillion, I think was the number. And then the next biggest is China, but it wasn't that close, right? But China is on track to be the biggest economy in the world fairly soon. So if you have an economy that large, if other people are willing to hold your currency, a reserve currency, you're kind of made in the shade, right? It's almost, you may have heard of something called too big to fail. That company is too big to fail, so we have to bail it out. Remember back when we had the financial crisis in 2008? The Obama administration had to bail out some big financial institutions. So that's where that term comes from. We are small. We're a blip in the global economy because our economy is super, super small. We have our own currency, the Bahamian dollar, which nobody wants to hold except Bahamians, right?
Okay.
You can't spend Bahamian dollars in the US or anywhere else. You can only spend it in the Bahamas. So that's the big difference. And so that's why we have to be concerned about what's the size of the debt. You asked the question about the local debt versus external debt. Very important distinction because the government does borrow in Bahamian dollars. Usually they issue bonds, they're held by banks or they're held by institutional investors like insurance companies and so on. Or they borrow on what we call the capital markets. They borrow in New York from JP Morgan or whatever, Credit Suisse, whatever bank they can find to lend us money. So two different borrowing markets. The Bahamian borrowing market is very much, they auction those. They would put out an auction for the bonds and then, settle on a price. When you go to the capital markets, it's very different. So they look at other things. They look at how much debt you have. They look at, liquidity position of the government, and they say, all right, I think your bond or can trade at this particular price. And so that can be very expensive if your domestic house is not in order.
Okay.
Now, the question of how much debt we can manage, there's a whole analysis you can do about sustainability and so on that the IMF does and the World Bank does to help us figure this out. But the bottom line is your ability to repay the debt when it's due. So that's what's important. And if it gets too large, it's putting pressure on your revenues that you don't want to spend all of your revenues just paying debt because we need to pay for teachers and so on and so on. And we need to build new roads and we need to maintain the hospital and blah, blah. So that's where the equation becomes very important, and you want to and that's where the 60% as a rule of thumb for countries like ours, small size, comes in. So I think if you look in the budget communication, the Prime Minister said we're going to get there by 2028. That's the date that Earl and I were talking about earlier in the conversation. But we're up to 80% of GDP, so that means that we have a long way to go. That means that the savings, the primary balance, has to be producing higher than 0.5% of GDP, which is the number that's in this budget, for us to get to that 60% by 2028. I'll give you one good example of where this was done very, very well, and that I was associated with, which happens to be the country of Jamaica, and I was working there at the time. And the Jamaican debt to GDP was at 150% in 2013. Whoa. 150. Do you know it's under 65% now? It's at 63 points. It's like just hovering just below 65% right now because, first of all, they had to go to the IMF. They got some support from the IMF. I worked at the IDB at the time. We did a big package. World Bank did a package. And they really took the fiscal discipline seriously. The primary surplus was extremely high for a long period of time to bring the debt down. And now they're in this very, what I call a virtuous situation where, their external reserves have risen, the economy is much more flexible, the exchange rate is stable, investment is flowing into Jamaica, and generally it's turned around. Now, Jamaica has lots of other problems which cause some other drags on investment, but to say that the fundamentals of that economy are really, if you open up an IMF report, you will see them always praising the Jamaica Reform Program. We have not, the Bahamas that is, has not had an IMF program in the past because we've opted not to go that route. But on several occasions, I have thought that it would have been a good idea for the Bahamas to do it, just because there are different windows. So, for example, there's something called the Resilient Trust Fund, which has been established just for countries like ours to deal with the impact of climate change.
Okay.
So it's not because you've been screwing up the economy because you spend too much and so on. That's not the thing. The point would be that because we have to address these threats around climate change, because we've had natural disasters that we're still paying for, by the way, to rehabilitate Grand Bahama and Abaco, that facility would be of great help.
Okay.
So I just put it out there.
Read a couple of texts here. Pearlie, you have to bring her back. Definitely. And she, I haven't told her, but she's going to be a regular. We can try to work this out and see how often we can get you to come. And we'll talk about bringing you back when there's stuff coming up with the budget or even the economy that we need to talk about and get a clearer picture. I'm so happy my cousin's back in Nassau. How important is it for government to control the salary threshold or how much of the government collection is paid out to civil servants? Let me read the next one and let you comment on all of that. Hi, Pearlie. In 2015, we added almost $600 million in new revenue. However, the next fiscal year, we had a fiscal deficit of $500 million with no expenditure shocks. During that fiscal year, the national debt rose as well. How does that equate to prudent fiscal management?
Okay, so really good questions. And the previous person who called also asked about
52.
what should be the rule of thumb on the size of wages and salaries to the budget. So the IMF looks like they like a number around 9% of GDP. Anything above 9% of GDP is considered like too much.
And you're talking about the salaries.
I'm talking about the wages and salaries.
Okay.
So, because that reflects, people working in and this is central government.
Yes,
so I'm not
That's
talking about the other public entities.
Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Health.
Yeah, talking about the central. I'm not talking about a public state-owned enterprises like
you're not talking
BPL
about ZNS or BPL
exactly,
and
no,
you're just talking about the direct.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So let's say that's under 9% of GDP. And for some of the same reasons, you don't want the government to be the largest employer in a country. So the government needs to always make sure that as much efficiency and productivity that you can extract from the people working in the government so that we get the best bang for our money. And I think every single Bahamian would agree that you can go in some government ministries and find unproductive people. Let me just put it that way.
You being nice,
but
I hear you.
the way to get more productivity out of the labor that you have is to use more technology, and that goes back to the point I was talking about on digital transformation. That if we were doing things differently, if the people working in whatever agency could interact with you over the internet to minimize that face-to-face contact, which sometimes is not pleasant or not efficient, or you don't have to drive to an office to do something that you should be able to do from your computer at home or from your phone, then that's more efficient. So you're always looking to make sure that number is reasonable, it's not growing too fast, and certainly shouldn't be growing faster than, say, inflation, because that means that something's awry there.
Amen. We're out of time.
Okay.
We just started and then it's time to go.
Wow.
But I so enjoy having you here. I am so happy to be talking about getting you, and I'm so happy we finally got you on this show. And I need you to come back. So promise me and my listeners that you'll be back.
Okay. I'll be back.
And I'm so glad we didn't get to talk sports today because my Dodgers did lose last night. But the Yankees come to LA tomorrow, and Naughty and I will talk about that tomorrow. Thank you so much. Thank you for the text. Thank you for the calls. Thank you so much. Thank you, Therese, for coming. So appreciate this. Naughty and Manjay will be in tomorrow with the Week in Review. I'll be at 5 with him tomorrow. Take your time out there, people. It is hot. Hydrate, drink your water, and drive safe on those streets. This has been Pearlie on Guardian Radio 96.9, The Talking Heads Thursday. Take care of yourselves. I'm out.
I died for you, that's easy to say. We have a list of people that we would take for them, for you, for everybody in this room. But they don't seem to see many coming through. See many coming through. Metaphorically, I'm the man, but literally, I don't know what I do. I'd live for you, and that's hard to do. Even harder to say when you know it's not true. Even harder to write when you know it's a night that would be
going through tires faster than a hot knife through butter? One wheel going left, one wheel going right, while the car crying and trying to go down the road straight? Chief, you need to go into Muffler World and get your wheels aligned. Muffler World will set you on the straight and narrow in no time. With computerized wheel alignment. And since the car is up already on the rack, take them one tread tires off and get some new ones. Muffler World on Mackey Street. Got that computerized wheel alignment and brand new tires.
Turn up the heat and the flavor with the new jalapeno fire from KFC. Crunch into the extra large filet that's made with KFC's secret recipe of 11 herbs and spices cooked to perfection. Stacked high with jalapeno peppers, pepper jack cheese, and our cool but kickin' jalapeno sauce. All wrapped up in a soft toasted brioche bun. Go bolder and crank up the heat. New jalapeno fire is bringing the heat and it's finger licking good.
Looking for tech solutions without the hassle? Since 1941, the Armory Company has been the Bahamas' trusted tech partner. From access control and cloud video surveillance to smart home setups and laptop repairs, we handle it all. Need a repair? We've got you covered, no matter where you bought it. Can't find what you need? Call us at 397-1600 for a custom solution. Visit us behind Wendy's on Mackey Street with delivery to all Family Islands. The Armory Company, where your tech problems meet their match.
Cancer Treatment Centers of America is now City of Hope, creating one of the leading cancer care and research networks from coast to coast, providing more of what you need. More locations means more care closer to home. More specialists means more expertise. More research means more breakthroughs. More advancements means more treatment options. And more options means more hope. Learn more at cancercenter.com.
Saturday, May 31st will be hype because the Free National Movement and Nassau top DJs are taking over. R.M. Bailey Park, Robinson Road, with the F&M Annual Fair and Raffle. Bring the whole crew. That's family, friends, and even your pets. There will be cooked and grilled food. Music by the Infinity Band, featuring Novi Pierre, plus the Pope of DJs. Tank, Select the Zone, featuring DJ Wampa, DJ Cannon, DJ T-Mac, and DJ Ace of Spades to keep the party going all day long.
It's your truly Select the Zone. Catch me live at the F&M Fair. It's going to be fun, pretty great fun activities. Also, some lucky winner is going to walk away with a grand prize drawing of $10,000. You heard it from Select the Zone. I'm fully endorsing the message. You'll catch us live. You'll come out, and some lucky winner is going to win big with the F&M.
Get your tickets from the F&M headquarters on Mackey Street or any F&M party member.
It's your boy DJ Tank, the Pope of DJ Affairs. Come meet me and Nassau's top DJs. Saturday, May 31st, R.M. Bailey Park, Robinson Road. The vibes are free, the food is hot, and the cash is real. Big money, $10,000.
Unstoppable together.
Calling all beer lovers. Get ready for Portside Pints. Join us on Saturday, June the 21st from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Nassau Cruise Port to sample beers from all around the world with live music and amazing Bahamian food. $10 general admission includes a free Portside Pints beer mug, or take it up a notch and check out our exclusive VIP lounge. That's the Portside Pints